Hey guys, welcome back to Character Design, a Tuts Plus premium course. I'm Ian Yates, and in this video we're going to look at lighting and texture. Let's quickly break down what we're going to cover in this video. Well, this is going to be another practical video, so we won't waste too much time talking, but we will quickly begin by discussing why and where we should use texture and lighting. We'll then dive right in and demonstrate 3-point lighting as an example on our student character. Now this is the last video in the series, but I'll still leave you with an assignment to complete, which will bring your own character design up to date. Now, it's worth stating that none of the steps I've walked you through in this design procedure are compulsory. The aim here hasn't been to recreate exactly what I've been designing, but to make you aware of some of the decisions you'll need to make whilst designing your own characters. It could well be the case that you're satisfied with your character in vector form and that you've no desire to further develop it. It might even be that you need nothing more than the sketches we came up with earlier in the series. In any case, we're now going to further refine our character in order to demonstrate the effect lighting can have. We'll begin though with texture. Now, we spoke earlier about the way clean vectorized lines can sometimes sterilize your drawing, taking the life out of your work. Now, we've already added some movement to our character by using brushes along the line work, but we're now going to increase the sketchiness of our work by pulling the drawing into Photoshop. Okay, so here we are in Adobe Illustrator, and what you'll see before you now will be fairly familiar to you because this is the stage which we reached in the previous video. We have here our collection of shapes which forms our student character, and some of the elements within there are these nice strokes which have added a little bit of movement and life to our otherwise fairly static image. So what we're now going to do is literally just select everything with the exception of these spectacle lenses here, because I'm going to bring those in separately, and I'm going to Command and C, and then I'll open up Photoshop where I have a new document waiting, and I'll Command and V that to paste, and I'm going to paste it as pixels, so these will be rendered as pixels, which makes editing and scaling awkward in the future, but for our purposes this is perfectly acceptable. So that's what we have so far. Now I want to grab those glasses separately as well. The reason I'm grabbing these separately is because I want to apply an element of transparency to them, and I'm going to affect the layer blending as well, the blend mode, which I'm going to apply as overlay, and I'm just going to make that 70% transparent. That gives our glasses just a little bit of extra dynamism, a bit of extra textual interest. It looks quite nice, so that's why we've done that. Now, in order to continue adding more texture and interest, we're going to use some watercolor brushes which are available freely from PSD Tuts to download. But before you do that, it's worth considering the fact that there are practicalities that we need to bear in mind here. We discussed this in a previous video where we were talking about the final purpose of our character. In our case, it's just a static image that we're after. But if you were to be animating your character, then it might not necessarily be so practical to be applying complex textures and effects to it. It might be much more sensible to leave things in a simplistic vector format. Anyway, as I say, in our case that's not a problem, so what we're now going to do is, having grabbed our brushes, we are going to select the brush tool, and you can see here at the bottom of my brushes palette all these strange effects here. These are all what have come included in the watercolor brush download. So I've selected a brush, I've made it appropriately sized, and I'm using this light blue texture, light blue color, sorry. And I'm now just going to stamp that twice, like so, on the layer underneath our little character's face there. So that just adds an element of texture. I actually want to shrink him down a little bit there, so I select those two layers, and I'm going to shrink him down, like so. That gives us an interesting background. Now, in order to apply a similar texture to the shape around his face, what I'm first going to do is Command and click this layer here, which will give me a marquee around his face, It doesn't include the glasses layer, so I'm now going to press Command and Shift and also select them. And you can see that's ever so slightly altered the shape of the marquee to now completely include everything there. So I will now add another layer above that. First I'm going to name some of my layers just so I can tell what I'm doing here. Specs. This is background texture, and then I'll put an additional texture there. Now I'm going to choose a second. See, what have I got here? I've got that background. I'm going to choose a second colour of that, which is a dark sort of brown based on his hair, which I've pre-prepared. And then I'm going to find a very similar brush effect. Let's see, what have we got? Something along the lines of this. That looks quite nice. Make it a bit smaller because I don't need to be very big. And then I can literally just stamp that like so, which has added a strange looking watercolour effect to his face. Okay, now that looks absurd like that, so what we're going to do is we're going to apply a blend effect. That's going to be vivid light to brighten things up, and then we'll bring the transparency down to 50. Now that's just sort of brightened things up a lot. We've got this sort of texture over his face here, and it's quite a nice effect. Just going to make it a little more subtle, 40%. Okay, so that's brought things to a nice textured conclusion. Next up, we're going to have a little look at some lighting effects. So why muck about with lighting at all? Well, it isn't vital, and in some situations it might even be impractical, just as we spoke about earlier when making life easier for yourself if you're animating, for example. But if you choose to enhance the detail of your character for certain situations, then lighting can be one way of spicing things up. I keep mentioning Ren and Stimpy, but they often appear in detailed still shots, beautifully rendered and lit, that emphasize gruesomeness. Lighting adds dimension. It lends drama and atmosphere. Now, computers can help us achieve this, and as most animated feature films are computer generated these days, it's more and more common. So we're now going to take a lesson from computer graphics and apply some CG rendering techniques to our character. We're not actually going to be working with CG software, we'll just look at the principles of 3-point lighting and apply them to our 2D drawing. For the time being, we're going to be thinking of our student as a 3D object. Now, 3-point lighting relies on 3 sources of light. Firstly, you'll have the key light, and I've got this demo in Adobe Illustrator here just to illustrate exactly what I'm talking about here. Here's our object in the center here. So we have first up key light, which is the dominant light source, such as the sun, for example. So we want to apply that at an angle as though it's the sun or it's the main source of light in a room, and this is going to cast predictably harsh shadows on much of our object. You have to consider that our object is in total darkness to begin with, and we're going to add increasingly more and more lighting sources to it. So here we have our key light, like so. Secondly, there's fill light, which represents a secondary light source, such as the sky, for example, or other reflective objects around us. Now, it's less harsh and it serves to further illuminate things whilst softening the whole effect. So this is going to be our fill light. Let's just put that in at a secondary angle like so. That's just sort of softened everything down. It's much more global, like so. And then lastly, we have rim light, which is also known as backlight, and that of course comes from such an angle like this. And this effectively gives us a brighter outline around our object, which helps it to stand out against a dark backdrop. So that's more or less what we're going to be looking at applying to our character. This little animated GIF illustrates perfectly what I'm talking about. This is from 3drender.com, which is worth checking out if you're interested in this sort of thing. Here you can see the key light only, and then we apply some fill light to soften things up, and then finally the backlight, which helps things stand out against dark backgrounds. Okay, so let's see if we can sort of recreate this 3-point lighting effect on our character here. We're not starting from completely dark, so effectively we've already applied our fill light. We've created a sort of ambience lighting to our whole drawing. But we're going to apply a couple of effects, a couple of layer styles to our student layer here. I just double click that to bring up the layer styles. We're firstly going to apply an inner shadow. There we go, you can see that instantly applied there. Let's remove this global light because I want this applied to the right hand side of the illustration. And that's because I'm envisaging my key light coming in from the left of the drawing here, shining on this side of his face. Now we've got black, which is the standard basic colour for a drop shadow and an inner shadow in Photoshop. But in actual fact there's no such colour as black. Black is the absence of all other light. So if you look around you, look at shadows, you'll see that you never actually see a black shadow. So what we're going to do is apply effectively a dark purple, which is actually far more genuine and far more pleasing as well. So we're going to have a multiplying value of 35%, and we want to increase the distance. So we'll bring that in. You can see it's spreading across our character like this, around 75 pixels, something along those lines, like so. Yeah, that's quite nice. Yeah, and then let's just increase the size, so we sort of blur that as well, because of course we've already applied our ambient light, effectively blurring everything else. So you'll see there's a little tinge of purple just coming across the edge of that shadow there, which is quite nice. So that's effectively dealt with our key and our fill light. Now we need to sort out our backlight or rim light. So we'll do that using the bevel and emboss layer style, and it's going to be an inner bevel. You can see it here. It's taken the effect. It's had the effect of applying a light shade highlight on the upper side there, and a darker shade on the bottom. So we'll remove this global light again because we don't want the angle to influence anything else, and we're going to have a depth. Make it slightly larger, make it slightly deeper, something along those lines. And we'll be increasing the size. Bring it, sort of spread it into our drawing there, and we'll soften that up as well, I think, suitably like so. Okay, now we've got here the highlighting and the shading. We're going to remove the shading because we don't need that. We've already catered for our shading there. We're dealing with highlighting, which is going to be a screen highlight, and we're actually going to apply a sort of soft green colour just to set nicely against the purple there. Nice. There we go. That will do nicely, and we're going to bring the transparency down because we don't need it to be quite so in your face. So we've got that as 50%, say. That's going to be our there we go, that's going to be our rim lighting. We can alter the angle that's coming in at as well, like so. That just highlights the edge of our character's shape against a darker background. Okay, that's dealt with that quite nicely. Now, if you'd like some further reading and are interested in digital graphics, take a look at Digital Lighting and Rendering, now in its second edition, by Disney Pixar's Jeremy Byrne. You'll find a ton of information in there, including a more detailed overview of 3-point lighting such as we talked about. Your assignment, logically, is to practice what we've demonstrated in this video, add texture where you feel it's appropriate, play with lighting on your objects, and try to visualize things in 3 dimensions. Having done this, your character design should have reached a pretty conclusive stage. Okay, that takes care of texture and lighting. My name's Ian Yates, and from all of us here at Tuts Plus, thanks for watching.